Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jasmine Tepele, and welcome to the Jamaica Neighborhood Plan Town Hall. Next slide. So before we begin, interpretation is available in Spanish and Bangla if you need in Spanish and Bangla. If you need interpretation, please click on the interpretation icon on the bottom of the screen. I'll leave this up for a moment just so that you can find the icon. Great. So if we can take down the presentation for one moment, I want to welcome Councilmember Williams, who's here to start us off with some welcoming remarks.
Why don't we circle back to the council member?
Of course. Okay. If my production too can share screen again, we can continue on and let us know when the council member is ready and we can take a pause. Great. So the Jamaica neighborhood planning process has been underway since May of 2023. Many of you have been actively involved in this process, coming to meetings, helping shape this plan. And for many others, this may be the first time you're hearing about this neighborhood plan. Thank you all for taking the time to join this meeting. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to share the latest update on the planning process. This town hall will focus on land use strategies and will share an updated draft zoning framework that describes where changes to the zoning will allow for development of new housing and jobs. We'll also share upcoming opportunities to get involved with the planning process. After the presentation, we'll have time to answer your questions. Next slide. Please hold for one moment while we address some tech issues. And then if my production too can take down the screen, I want to again welcome Councilmember Williams to make some welcoming remarks.
Hello, apologies. I was trying to get myself off of mute. Good evening, everybody. Excited to see so many people on the Zoom this evening. And even more excited for the opportunities and investments into our community. I really want to start by thanking DCP for all of their hard work and for really listening to me, but more importantly, listening to the community and helping to provide uh, meaningful dialogue. And also want to thank the JAR Steering Committee, who has been with us for over a year now, for continuing to provide their feedback in the evening time. As I always say, your intellectual energy that you're giving evening is really helpful and will help shape the project. And so while we've been doing a lot of outreach work, we still have some ways to go to really study the impact of this proposed zoning change that you'll hear from DCP in just a little while. And I want to really start off by saying I know that our community really wants to protect the fabric of what our community looks like right now. And so no single and two family zoning district that we currently have will be changed by this plan. And so if you live in a single family household or a two family household, this plan does not seek to change any of that zoning. It's really focused largely on the downtown area and major corridors within the Southeast community like Merritt Boulevard, Liberty Avenue, Diabura, et cetera, and are being studied because of the opportunity most importantly, to have our faith-based institutions, which I see some are on, who really are the property owners, if you will, of the land along those corridors, to have opportunities to do more with their space. Um, Industrial zoning changes is another critical piece of this, and really will allow for an innovative and robust conversation. I know when I heard about the possibility of rezoning some of our industrial spaces, that have been quite a nuisance and quality of life public health issue for the community for a very long time, I was excited about the prospects to help these businesses reimagine what those spaces could look like outside of its current industrial use. And so for me, zoning really creates different types of opportunities, and it is really incumbent upon of all of you on the call, myself included, to realize what those opportunities are. We are just providing options for property owners. Nothing is necessarily set in stone. And we are simply studying what would happen if we can maximize opportunities for individuals who currently own properties within the study map. There will be many more opportunities for feedback. I saw some stuff on social media about notifications and me sending certain things out. Yes, things move quickly. I know we have you'll see through the presentation, there's some upcoming meetings that you have now pre-advance notice of, and hopefully we can get that out to the community as soon as possible. I will formally, apologize if folks think that things are coming to them at late notice, but there will be many more opportunities. You can always email us, DCP, if you have specific feedback or concerns. We definitely log those concerns. And I just look forward to you all being a part of the study, more individuals being a part of the study to really share with us their feedback, because this process is really only halfway to completion before it even makes it back to the council for a vote. So thank you so much again for joining. I do have to hop to another meeting, so I will be on this call and off this call, but just really important for me to just share some words, and also just thank everyone for joining, and also express my sincere thanks to the JAR committee, DCP, and looking forward to a robust discussion.
Thank you, Council Member. Okay. Thank you. So we're going to start by giving a brief overview of the Jamaica Neighborhood Plan and the work we've done so far. I want to introduce my colleague, Siobhan Jackson, who's been working very closely on this project with us. She will go over an overview of the work that we've done so far.
Thank you, Jasmine, and thank you, Councilmember Williams. So we will talk about what is the Jamaica Neighborhood Plan. So next slide, please. The Jamaica Neighborhood Plan is a vision of goals and strategies for the next 15 years to shape how and where Jamaica grows. The plan is being developed through a collaborative process that includes community leaders, community organizations, city agencies, and other local stakeholders to think about Jamaica's future and purpose, ideas for programs, services, policies, and other investments. Next slide. The neighborhood plan currently focuses on Jamaica Center. It goes north to Hillside Avenue from the Van Wyck Expressway to Hollis, and then south of the Long Island Railroad tracks along major corridors like Sufton, Guy Brewer, and Merrick Boulevard. I want to take a moment to emphasize that we are not proposing any zoning changes around the single family and two family areas, as the council member mentioned earlier. Our neighborhood plan is around Jamaica Center, important corridors, and around the industrial areas. Next slide. So we have these draft visions and goals. At the beginning of this process, we worked with many community members to help create a vision for this project. Jamaica is prosperous thanks to affordability and inclusivity and its diversity and its business opportunities and investment activities. To achieve this vision, we created a set of overarching goals for this neighborhood plan. Improve quality of life in the neighborhood for current and future residents, foster a thriving local economy and help residents build wealth, create a climate resilient and environmentally just Jamaica, achieve equitable health and safety outcomes for current and future residents, maintain cultural diversity, and nurture inclusivity in Jamaica. We also thought about preserving and bolstering Jamaica's rich multicultural history. These goals are guiding our current and future decision making about housing, transportation, the public realm, arts and culture, and more. Next slide. So, who is involved in the process? Who's been involved so far? This includes all of you here tonight and the thousands of community members who've already shared their ideas and perspectives on the future of their neighborhood. We are the New York City Department of City Planning, and it's our job to coordinate with you all as well as our partner agencies and elected officials. The planning process is guided by a steering committee formed by Councilmember Williams. The steering committee is made up of community leaders, local organizations, businesses, institutions, and elected officials who advise on this process and help us maximize participation. The council member also formed an executive committee to bring together local, state, and federal elected officials who represent Jamaica to deepen their understanding of local concerns and equip them to better advocate for these issues in their respective roles. Finally, we coordinate closely with city and state agencies to make sure future policy, programs, and services are aligned with the Jamaica Plan. Next slide. No one knows more about the current and future needs of Jamaica than the people who live, work, and go to school here. The engagement strategy for the Jamaica Neighborhood Plan was designed to make it easy for people to add their thoughts online and in person. We've tabled at events, created a survey that received over 1,000 responses, convened working groups, brought together local high school students, held an exhibit at Queens Public Library, and much more. We're going to continue to create opportunities for everyone in the community to engage in this process. So I hope you tell your family, your neighbors, people you know or work with in the neighborhood. Tell them to get involved. Next slide. So what is the neighborhood planning process and what does that look like? At a high level, here is our planning process. Before we started engagement, agencies did research to understand the existing conditions of the neighborhood, as well as the status of past planning efforts. We identified key partners and started to engage with them. Next, we started working with communities online and in person to understand issues, opportunities, and priorities, as well as ideas for how and where the neighborhood should grow. As a result, we produced the vision and goals I shared with you earlier. Next, we started working to develop draft strategies. These strategies are a concrete set of ideas for changes to zoning and investments in programs and services, as well as policy changes to support the current and future neighborhood. Tonight, we are sharing the draft zoning framework, which is a part of the draft strategies. The next step in the process is for our zoning framework to enter environmental review. New York City's environmental review process involves a comprehensive analysis of potential environmental impacts of a proposal, such as air quality, noise, transportation, schools, and open space. We'll talk about it more later in the presentation. While the zoning goes through environmental review, we will continue working with our partner agencies, and all of you will continue to define potential investments that are needed to support the neighborhood as it grows. Finally, we will come back together next year to kick off the Uniform Land Use Review process, where stakeholders, including community boards, borough presidents, the City Planning Commission, and the City Council, will all have a chance to weigh in on the plan. And if approved, the plan will result in new zoning, as well as new programs, services, and capital projects. The city is required to update you on the status as these commencements are on an annual basis. Next slide. So far, we focused on the work we were doing in Jamaica for the next 15 years. But let's take a step back to talk about Jamaica's history, which highlights the places and people that have created the Jamaica we know today. There are many histories of Jamaica, some of which are documented, but many that are not. These are just a few highlights, but they are far from a complete story. Much of Jamaica's history is based around its location and the economic benefits that related to it. The Munseen, Lempe, and Canarsie people used Jamaica Avenue for travel and trading. The Europeans who colonized this area similarly saw the benefits of trail and used it for transportation and trade as well. There is so much early history of the people who lived here, but I want to highlight that Jamaica was home to the Green, also referred to as Douglaston Community, which is one of New York City's oldest African American communities. I encourage everyone to take a trip to Kings Manor if you haven't. Kings Manor Museum is where you can learn more about the history there. In the 1800s, we start to see infrastructure like in Brooklyn and Jamaica Railroad built electric trolley lines and eventually the elevated trains over Jamaica Avenue, which we can see in some of these photos. We also started to see economic investment. The Jamaica Savings Bank was a bank created by local businesses and prominent community members that wanted to see Jamaica prosper and supported development that helped Jamaica thrive. Next slide. The early 1900s is said to be one of Jamaica's most economically prosperous times. With the new elevated train lines and new Long Island Railroad station that was built around the same time, it's estimated that the population doubled. This brought new housing development, the increase of commercial activity, and also industrial jobs along the rail lines. Jamaica Center was said to have been the third or fourth largest retail shopping district at the time, with 3 large department stores like the Gertz Department Store and Macy's, over 1,000 small businesses. The prosperity attracted many people to move to this neighborhood, including many famous jazz musicians who called Alice Lay home. Over the years, there was an economic decline. The reason included that the elevated train line was the issue, or white flight from these areas. There were a number of strategies that were implemented to help support the community, like the creation of Jamaica Development Corporation and Jamaica Center for Arts and Learning, or as we know it as JCAL. The elevated train line was taken down from Jamaica Avenue, and eventually the Jamaica Center station was built. Location and access attracted a growing immigrant population and many middle-income Black residents who became homeowners. There were continued projects like urban renewal that developed York College and the Federal Social Security building we see today, as well as the introduction of in-place industrial parks, which protected the industrial businesses in Jamaica. Next slide. In more recent history, there have been a lot of work to create a vibrant neighborhood through events like the Jamaica Jams Festival, which first started around 1996, and other events like the Jamaica Jams Festival. There's also been a few planning efforts over the past decades that included 2007's Jamaica rezoning, which created the Downtown Jamaica Special District. The Jamaica Now Action Plan, which looked into investments and improvements in the neighborhood, building community capacity, research which identified community needs and opportunities within the arts, and the Downtown Revitalization Initiative from the state, which funded different projects and initiatives like the Greater Nexus in Jamaica, which is a local co-working space. Jamaica's recent history is also a very multicultural and diverse. There are recent street co-namings of homeland to acknowledge the contributions of the Bengali community in Jamaica. Next slide. And I will turn it back over to Jasmine, who will go into the section about why Jamaica is the way it is today.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. So there are many things that people celebrate about this neighborhood, but we've heard from very civically minded residents and elected officials that they want to celebrate the past while proactively building the future that they want to see. Our goals that we shared earlier reflect improvements that the residents want to see in the neighborhood, and we'll review them each in this section to explain the question of why now? So from 2010 to 2020, Jamaica's population has increased by 13.4%, which is higher than the rest of New York City, which grew by 7.7%. Meanwhile, housing production has only increased by 10.1%, and 57% of renter households in Jamaica are rent burdened, meaning they're spending more than a third of their income on rent. As a comparison, citywide, where housing production has increased a bit closer to the population increase, and 52% are rent burden. Housing is considered affordable if it costs less than 1/3 of your income. As we envision a future for Jamaica, these housing issues in mind, Jamaica must improve quality of life in the neighborhood for current and future residents. Next slide. Residents of Jamaica face some of the longest commute times in New York City for 47.3 minutes. Compare that citywide in Queens, where commute times are roughly around 41 to 43 minutes, respectively. Those long journeys point to a lack of local job opportunities in the neighborhood, so Jamaica must foster a thriving local economy and help residents build wealth. Next slide. Jamaica has a heat vulnerability score of 5, the highest risk amongst other New York City neighborhoods. That means that Jamaica residents are not only dealing with higher temperatures, they're also at a greater risk for heat-related illness or death. The factors included in the heat vulnerability index are surface temperature, green space, and access to home air conditioning. Most heat stroke deaths in New York City occur in homes without air conditioning. Fewer households in Jamaica have air conditioners than in Queens overall. As climate change continues to make our urban spaces hotter, improving green spaces is an important way to help combat heat vulnerability. Areas covered by trees, grass, or other plants, instead of hard surfaces like roads, sidewalks, or buildings, tend to reduce temperatures in the immediate area and may increase air quality. So, as we envision a future for Jamaica, it must be climate resilient and environmentally just. Next slide. Hospitalizations related to injuries from assaults capture the consequences of community violence. Jamaica and Hollis have a rate of assault-related hospitalizations that is higher than the citywide rate. Public safety is important when the physical characteristics of the environment encourage residents to feel a sense of ownership and collective guardianship or a defensible space. Children in Jamaica are more likely to be hospitalized for asthma than children from other neighborhoods in Queens. Public health and the built environment are closely related to one another. Your zip code determines your health outcomes more than your genetic code. Therefore, Jamaica must achieve equitable health and safety outcomes for current and future residents. In Jamaica, 53% of residents are Black, 16% are Asian, and 18% are Hispanic, Latinx. However, Black residents have seen a slight decline in population from 2010 to 2020. Jamaica also has a high foreign-born population. Most are coming from Bangladesh, Jamaica, the country, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Dominican Republic. As we continue to plan for the future and Jamaica continues to change, Jamaica must maintain cultural diversity and nurture inclusivity. Jamaica's jazz, hip hop, and arts history is one of the most prominent in the city and even in the nation. Notable artists include Billie Holiday, John Coltrane, Run DMC, and LL Cool J. We've also heard from you during our community engagement that you want to make Jamaica's cultural history more well known. So Jamaica must preserve and bolster the neighborhood's rich multicultural history. Next slide. So as we plan for the next 15 years with you all, local organizations, elected officials, and city and state agencies, we're working to coordinate a package of zoning strategies, capital investments, policies, programs, and services to support the prosperous Jamaica you all have envisioned. In this next section, we'll focus on our zoning strategies. While zoning alone can't address all the issues the community has raised, it does play an important role in creating the potential for opportunities and improvements. With this in mind, we're going to walk through the draft zoning framework, which outlines our proposed zoning changes in detail. I want to introduce my colleague, Elisa. She will be walking everyone through this next section. She's worked very hard and very closely through this neighborhood plan. So Elisa, handing it off to you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elisa, and I'll be walking you through our draft zoning framework proposals. Next slide, please. So the draft zoning framework represents where we think the neighborhood's land use should change and where it should stay the same. It describes places where we can create more opportunities for affordable housing, as well as places where we'd like to grow more jobs. We want to highlight that this is only one part of the neighborhood plan. The overall plan will include capital investments, policy, programs, and services, but our focus tonight will be on the zoning framework section. This framework will help become an organizing force for the overall neighborhood plan. Next slide, please. Like we mentioned earlier in the presentation, our work is guided by these goals. Each goal has a number of strategies that you can find on our website, but we specifically highlighted the strategies that the zoning framework is addressing. For example, as you can see under Goal 1, to improve quality of life, the zoning framework is aiming to create a supportive environment for diverse businesses to grow or open up to meet the needs of the community. Next slide. Just to dive a little deeper, here's how the zoning tools we are using throughout Jamaica to help support the goals we shared. Our toolbox includes an affordable housing tool called mandatory inclusionary housing, which requires developers to create a portion of units as income-restricted affordable housing. There are also zoning tools that require the ground floors to be active, urban design controls that help create buildings with a uniform look, and others that we'll talk more about throughout this section. Next slide. Here is our updated draft zoning framework. Each of the colored areas represents a new zoning district. Places that are not colored do not have proposed zoning changes, even if they are within the black line indicating the study area boundary. I know there's a lot of information on this map, so we're going to explain in detail what we're proposing in each area through this section. Also, we are an agency that loves drafts, so this is not the final zoning proposal. We want to be able to share drafts early and often with everyone. One of the most important functions of this framework is to serve as a foundation for the environmental review, which will study how the proposed zoning changes will impact the neighborhood. We'll talk more about the environmental review later in this presentation, but for now, let's go over the zoning changes we're proposing. Transit corridors are important routes that connect community members to their homes, work, school, and other neighborhoods through buses, cars, and trains. They also provide local essentials like supermarkets, laundromats, pharmacies, and others. They're often wider than side streets and can accommodate a range of uses and transportation options. Hillside Avenue, Sutphin Boulevard, Merrick Boulevard, and Guy Arbor are a few examples of Jamaica's transit corridors. Next slide. First, we're going to talk about the southern corridors, which are Merrick Boulevard, Guy Arbor, and a portion of Sutphin Boulevard. You can see these areas in yellow on the map to the right. As a reminder, these areas around the areas around the corridors or any areas under the thick black line that are outside of the study area are not receiving zoning changes. Next slide. On the screen is a photo of Merrick Boulevard. Merrick Boulevard, Guy Arbor, and Sutphin Boulevard are important streets in the community. Many young people have shared with us that they rely on buses that take them along Merrick to get to high school around Jamaica. Someone on the steering committee reminds us of Ernest Foods, that is a Black-owned market on Merrick as well. On the left side of the photo, we added a dotted line to show the existing zoning, which is an R5D, the C24 commercial overlay. This generally means that today we can typically build up to 4 stories here. We've heard that it's important to many that these corridors continue to serve the local community and act as welcoming and walkable entrances to the neighborhoods. We've also heard about the need for senior condos or co-ops to help elders stay in the neighborhood when they're ready to move out of single or 2-family homes. Our goal is to create a zoning framework to support these needs. Next slide. Here is a sketch of what this area of Merrick Boulevard could look like with the zoning changes we're proposing. We want to emphasize that these are just conceptual sketches and there are no actual plans for these specific buildings. We want to share a visual reference of what zoning could help create. Next slide. For these corridors, we want to enhance what's already there by using zoning as a tool to create the foundation. Our proposed zoning changes will help create more housing options along these corridors that can fit a wide range of family sizes, including seniors who want to downsize, first-time renters moving out of their family's home, and growing families. This increase in zoning allows us to use mandatory inclusionary housing here, which requires that 20 to 30% of new housing be affordable housing. This doesn't currently exist here. So without these zoning changes, any new buildings created here today will most likely be market rate. The zoning also allows for community facility uses like schools, healthcare facilities, cultural uses, and faith-based uses to coexist with housing, creating walkable access to local resources. The district we're proposing is a contextual district, which have design controls that help build new buildings align with existing ones, creating a uniform look and allowing sunlight to reach the street. Next slide. To help create the opportunity, we're proposing an R7A district here. An R7A zoning district allows for mid-rise residential buildings up to around 11 stories. This zoning district along the commercial overlay can create a few types of buildings, including mid-rise residential buildings, buildings with street-level stores and housing on top, or housing with community facility uses like schools, healthcare facilities, cultural uses, and faith-based uses, to name a few examples. These developments are built near the street line to help match with other older buildings in the neighborhood. They're also required to provide street trees, which we've heard from many is needed in this area. Overall, R7A districts are designed to work well with wide streets, making them feel like they're proportional to the neighborhood and sized right for people walking around. Next slide. Next, we'll talk about the Sutphin Boulevard corridor going towards Liberty Avenue, the western portion of Jamaica Avenue going towards the Van Wyck, and Hillside Avenue. Like Merrick and Guy Arbor, these areas also play an important role in getting people to work, school, and nearby neighborhoods and serving local needs. What sets them apart are the wider streets and accessibility to many buses and trains, such as the F train on Hillside, or the EJZ lines near Sutphin. It's also walkable to the shopping areas of Jamaica Avenue, as well as schools, parks, and nearby medical facilities. Because of its location and rich transportation options, they're an important connector to jobs, schools, and other resources. Next slide. To support these areas, we're proposing a C44D district along Hillside Avenue and R7 districts by Sutphin Boulevard, Liberty Avenue, and the western portion of Jamaica Avenue. We're going to focus on the R7X that's being proposed by Sutphin and by Jamaica Avenue. We'll come back to Hillside Avenue in a later section. R7X districts allow for taller and denser buildings than the R7A we are proposing along Merrick and Guyer Brewer. These types of buildings can go up to 14 stories and typically include urban design controls to help create building shapes that better relate to the surrounding area. Similar to what we talked about along Guyer and Merrick, the increase in zoning allows us to use mandatory inclusionary housing here so that any new development is required to provide income-restricted affordable housing for 20 to 30% of units so that we don't get situations where only people with high incomes can live near these valuable resources. These types of contextual districts are typically built by the street line so they can match up with other older buildings in the neighborhood. We know this is a lot of information, so we will be holding info sessions in the following weeks called zoning deep dives, one of which will focus solely on the proposals for these transit corridors we just went through. The corridor area zoning deep dive will be held on June 27th. Next slide. Moving on to the downtown core, which is what we're calling the area that is locally referred to as Jamaica Center. The downtown core includes the areas around Long Island Railroad, the Sutphin Boulevard EJZ line, and the air train, areas along Jamaica Avenue going towards Merrick, and the areas around Rufus King Park. Like we mentioned before, this area has historically been a commercial, shopping, and transportation center for not only local residents, but also for people across the city. Next slide. The next few slides will focus on this core section of Jamaica Center. You can see these areas in red on the map to the right. Next slide. Here is an image of Sutphin Boulevard today, looking towards the Long Island Railroad tracks. Today, the area has a mix of single-story storefronts, 3 to 4-story buildings, and larger buildings. To the right of the image, we use a dashed line to show the zoning here today, which is C62. As you can see, the zoning district already allows for buildings up to 12 to 16 stories. It's a good reminder that there are a number of reasons, including the real estate market, as well as the plans and priorities of individual landowners, that determine what actually gets built in a neighborhood. Next slide. Here's a conceptual illustration of opportunities that could be created through zoning changes along Sutphin as an example. Again, this sketch is just an example of what could be here, and none of these buildings are planned or being proposed. Next slide. Through the proposed zoning changes, we have the opportunity to support an area that is welcoming for the people who live here and for the thousands of people who work and travel through this area. The changes create the opportunity for a wide range of shops, restaurants, and services, producing an active and vibrant street around this regional transit hub. We can create economic opportunities by providing for a mix of commercial uses that can generate jobs like office, medical spaces, and retail. These areas also require mandatory inclusionary housing, so developers will provide permanent affordable housing. There are a number of other non-zoning strategies we're exploring with partner agencies to help with some of the issues we've been hearing, and we'll continue to explore those strategies throughout this process. Next slide. To create this, we're proposing a C64 district. This district is a high-density commercial district that supports major commercial centers by allowing a wide range of uses from offices and retail, residential and community facilities, like medical and cultural institutions. This helps create a neighborhood where people can live, work, and play. This district already exists in the area immediately south of Long Island Railroad Station. We'll expand it along Sutphin Boulevard and also Jamaica Avenue. These districts offer a lot of flexibility in the types of buildings they can create, depending on what mix of uses are getting built, like being able to include several floors of commercial. In general, they can create tall buildings and up to 23 stories under the quality housing zoning provision. This district also allows for a significant amount of housing and will partially require mandatory inclusionary housing as well. This area currently has a program called voluntary inclusionary housing, which, as its name implies, is an optional income-restricted housing program. So the introduction of mandatory inclusionary housing will require and expand affordability options here. To hear more about the affordable housing programs and requirements that can be achieved through zoning changes, we will have a zoning deep dive info session on housing policy concepts on June 20th next week. Next slide. Here's a different example of a different zoning district we're proposing. The image on screen is Jamaica Avenue looking towards Sutphin Boulevard. Today, the current zoning could allow for a building up to 8 to 11 stories. Here's a conceptual sketch. Next slide, please. Here's a conceptual sketch of the same area to show how an area could be developed with the proposed zoning changes. Next slide. Similar to the Sutphin area, we want zoning to help create a live, work, play balance that supports a regional shopping center, but also ensures local residents have access to everyday essentials and services. In general, supporting more creative, fun, and joyful streets is something we've heard that the community members want to see more of. Next slide. To achieve this, we're proposing a range of C6 districts like C63X, C63A, and C63. These districts are specifically along Jamaica Avenue after Rufus King Park, a small portion of Parsons Boulevard, and the eastern part of Jamaica Avenue. These districts are similar to C64 districts, but are less dense and allow for shorter buildings and permit uses that support this regional hub and allow for a greater amount of housing, including affordable housing. It creates a slight step down from the C64 district around the core of Sutphin and Jamaica Center. Next slide. Next, we're going to talk about another area of Jamaica Center. We're now focusing on the areas surrounding Rufus King Park, which are the lighter red areas on the map to the right. It's not highlighted on the map here, but I also want to mention Hillside Avenue to the north because the proposed zoning districts we mentioned are similar. Next slide. Here is an image of 89th Avenue by Rufus King Park. The dotted lines to the left show the existing R6 district, which today can typically create buildings of up to 6 to 9 stories. Next slide. And here is a conceptual image that shows what could be created through the proposed zoning changes. Next slide. Zoning here is trying to create these more local mixed-use opportunities that create walkable experiences for residents and jobs through new businesses. Next slide. One of the zoning districts we're proposing is C44D district. This district is also proposed along Hillside Avenue. This district is a commercial district that requires active ground floors and allows for multiple floors of non-residential uses as well. This district does allow for residential uses. It has what we call a residential equivalent district. This just means that we'll look at the residential building rules that is associated with this district, which is an R8A district. Next slide. Moving to a different area of Jamaica, now we're going to talk about an area south of the Long Island Railroad tracks that currently has a mix of residential and manufacturing uses next to each other that occurred before zoning even existed. Next slide. For this section, we're going to look at these areas east of Sutphin Boulevard and south of the Long Island Railroad tracks. These areas are in blue on the map to the right. Next slide. The image on the screen shows a view from 95th Avenue. The dotted lines to the left show the existing C64 district, while the dotted lines to the right show the manufacturing M14 district. This area has always had residential homes, but has also seen a growing residential population adjacent to the manufacturing area. Next slide. Here is a conceptual view of what could be created through the proposed zoning changes. Again, zoning cannot control when or if development happens, but we wanted to share a visual of the possibilities and demonstrate how these two adjacent uses can coexist on both sides of the streets, creating a live-work neighborhood. Next slide. Through these zoning changes, we want to create a transition to better balance between the residential and manufacturing districts so that it helps improve the quality of life for residents and also provide jobs in walking distance with easy access to transit options. Next slide. To support this area, we're proposing a series of paired districts. Paired districts allow for both residentials with light manufacturing, for example. The M12As are light manufacturing districts, are new districts that were recently created that give a boost of light manufacturing and a variety of commercial uses, while providing building forms with height limits that suit manufacturing and all commercial buildings. Light manufacturing uses are activities where businesses can produce goods, such as foods, like the urban farm, Gotham Greaves, that's located on Jamaica Avenue near Hollis. This district is paired with an R71 district, which is a medium density residential area. The zoning allows for a flexible approach here to create buildings that have multiple uses like commercial, community facility, housing, and light industrial. Depending on the mix of uses and other factors, buildings can range in size, making for a live-work environment. Next slide. Finally, tonight we are going to talk through one of the industrial areas we're looking into, which we are calling industrial area, south of the Long Island Railroad tracks, abutting the area we just spoke about. If you're interested to hear more about what we are planning for the other industrial areas in Jamaica to the east, please join us for our Jamaica zoning deep dive info sessions in the coming weeks, one of which will focus solely on the industrial areas, which is on June 25th. Next slide. For this section, we are focusing on an area south of Liberty Avenue, around Sutphin Boulevard and Tuskegee Airman Way. This currently is where the large old Elmhurst area site is located, shown in purple on the map to the right. This area is also within the Jamaica Industrial Business Zone, or IBZ, which is one of the 21 areas citywide that supports industrial jobs. This is an area where we're proposing to grow industrial jobs by using a new zoning district, M12A, which was mentioned previously. Next slide. The image here shows a view of the area looking west along Liberty Avenue. On the left or south side of the street is the industrial growth area we just saw in purple on the previous slide, and on the right of the street is the area we saw in the previous section, which was the downtown extension. The dotted lines on the foreground show the existing M14 district and what could currently be built there, which is a maximum height of 10 stories. Next slide. Here's a conceptual view of what could be created through zoning changes. Again, zoning does not control when or how development happens, but we wanted to share what the possibilities could look like. Next slide. Through these zoning changes and the new different types of uses that will be allowed here, we want to promote job-generating uses that could be commercial or new types of light industrial manufacturing activity. New manufacturing activities today have developed to be cleaner and more varied than what they used to be 20 years ago. So we hope that by updating the zoning, different businesses can emerge that can help reduce pollution, noise, and mitigate urban heat within these manufacturing areas, and also create a balanced transition with the residential mixed-use areas nearby. Next slide. To support this area, we're proposing to map the light manufacturing district M12A. Again, M12As are the new light manufacturing district that unlocks a wider range of densities and a mix of business types, as well as a physical form that is more supportive of loft-style vertical industrial buildings that we see across the city, but were previously not possible to build. This new zoning district will allow more flexibility for businesses to allow for different uses that focus on job-generating and future-focused industries that will be suitable around the existing neighborhood character. That was a quick overview of the draft proposed zoning framework. We know this is a lot of information all at once, so again, we hope that you will join us in the following weeks for the zoning deep dive info sessions to learn more about the specifics on housing policy, industrial areas, and the transit corridors. Now I'll hand it back to Jasmine to talk about the planning process moving forward and how you can continue to participate and stay involved on this ongoing process.
Thank you, Lisa. Next slide, please. So in this next phase of our work, we're going to start working on one of the parallel tracks that are happening at the same time of all this other work that we're doing. So for the zoning, we're going to be starting the environmental review process. where we work to analyze potential impacts of the proposed zoning changes on a variety of topics, including schools, transportation, environmental quality, and public health. Next slide. The environmental review process is also known as the City Environmental Quality Review. So you commonly hear us call this seeker. It's a process that looks at the effect a project might have on the environment proposed for land use applications. So in our case, a large neighborhood planning proposal to change the zoning in a specific area of our study area. Next slide. So part of this work is leading up to what's called a draft scope of work. This draft scope of work describes the project, including the details of what's being proposed and where in the neighborhood. So essentially that draft zoning framework that Elisa just finished reviewing, this is part of what's included in the draft scope of work. It's detailing that draft zoning framework in writing. And so what the draft scope of work also has is going to be an outline of what environmental topics are going to be specifically studied, and also the types of data that it's going to try to gather and how that data is going to be analyzed. And so this draft scope of work document was just released this week. So we're sharing that zoning framework that's outlined in that draft scope of work tonight. We can share out a copy of that draft scope of work after tonight's presentation so that you all can have that written document outlining the changes that we're proposing, and also have this outline of some of the environmental topics that will be studied. Again, this is the start of the environmental review process. So what the draft scope of work is doing is just giving an outline of what will be studied for the next couple of months. I think, like Elisa mentioned earlier, we are an agency that loves drafts. There will be many more drafts of this coming out. This, again, is just an outline, as if you're trying to create an outline of an essay. Next slide. And so with the release of the draft scoping document, we do host what's called a scoping meeting. So for the scoping meeting, the purpose of this meeting is for you as community members and for everyone who wants to provide comments related to recommendations and ideas and comments around what should be included in this analysis. So our scoping meeting is going to be virtual. It's going to be on July 11th, starting at 2 p.m. Anyone can join this meeting. We will make sure to send around this information, but I want to make sure that everyone kind of understands the format of this meeting. Scoping meetings are just a way for the city to document all these recommendations that the community has. So it's not a traditional meeting where you ask questions and get responses. The only thing that the city is doing is documenting your comments and your feedback during that meeting. You will have 3 minutes to share your recommendations and feedback, and the city will record all of that throughout the meeting. If you cannot make that meeting, you will be able to provide comments and recommendations in writing, through email, through mail. We have different ways in order to kind of collect your comments after the scoping meeting as well. And so again, this is really a place for the community to talk about, the different things that we're proposing. If you have concerns about a certain district and you think like, I think that this district isn't right for this neighborhood because of X, Y, and Z, you should really take a look at air quality. You should really take a look at the schools. You should really take a look at, all these different things. It's really helpful for us for you all to be as specific as possible. If you want us to look at specific industrial areas within our neighborhood plan, tell us about those areas and tell us why we should be looking at them. Next slide. And so again, just outlining the different ways that you can participate in this scoping meeting. We have a number of different ways for that July 11th date. If you just want to watch the live stream and listen in to the kinds of comments that are coming in, the the scoping meeting will be live streamed on our YouTube. So that's youtube.com at New York City Department of City Planning. The recording will then afterwards be available, and we'll make sure to send that around as well. Second, if you want to add your comments on that scoping document during the scoping meeting, you can attend virtually. Again, we'll make sure to send around that information and make sure that it gets spread as far and as wide as possible. You during this meeting will have the opportunity to add your comments into City Record. Again, it's not a traditional meeting where you get to ask questions and will people answer your questions. That's time that we're going to have for tonight. But during that meeting, it's really an opportunity for you to make sure that the city knows where they should be looking at when it comes to impacts in the neighborhood. And then lastly, like I just mentioned, if you can't make that July 11th scoping meeting, it's okay. You have 10 days after that scoping meeting to submit your comments, again, through email, through mail. We'll make sure to send around this information so that there's multiple ways for you to submit your comments. Next slide. And so, we talked a lot about environmental review. And I think Elisa had mentioned this throughout her presentation of the zoning framework. We want to make sure that everyone has as much information about these changes as possible. Again, these are proposed changes. Nothing is finalized, and this is still the middle of a process. So we want to be able to have more meetings to focus in on certain areas. So starting next week, we are going to have what we're calling zoning deep dives. They will be virtual so that it's accessible and as many people as possible can join. They'll also be recorded. So in case if you can't join a specific deep dive that you're very interested in, we'll make sure to post them on our website, post them online, and share them out so that everyone has access to this information. So we hope all of you can join one of our zoning deep dives. We're going to really hone in on some of the changes that we're proposing through housing. We'll hone in on the industrial areas and just talk about some of these corridor areas. All of that leading up to our virtual scoping meeting. Again, we want to make sure that everyone's prepared for that meeting. Throughout that, it's going to be a month out from today. So please feel free to ask us all your questions. We are around even after this meeting and after these zoning deep dives. Our website is jamaicaplan.nyc, and we also have an email address, jamaicaplan@planning.nyc.gov. We want to be able to make sure that everyone has the information that they need to get involved in this process. Next slide. And so we do have a public website where you can find the draft scope of work. Like I mentioned, we will share this around afterwards, but in case if you want to pull it up tonight, the website is on the screen, but we'll also make sure to drop a link later tonight so that you have access to that as well. Next slide. Again, our email address is jamaicaplan@planning.nyc.gov. Our website is jamaicaplan.nyc. Below, you see kind of the next upcoming schedule of events. This is also on our website, available today, so anyone can go on there and get access to these to register to all these events that are coming up. We will also continue to provide more opportunities to engage, whether that's in person, whether that's virtual, whether that's hybrid. Again, emphasizing that we're still in the middle of a process. So if you're just joining for the first time today, there's a lot more work that we need to do. Zoning is just one piece of all of this. There's so much other work and strategies that help solve issues across, Jamaica that we've been hearing. A lot of the work that we've left to do is a lot of like non-zoning work, working with our partner agencies to think about how do we improve quality of life for the residents and future residents too? And thinking about just how are we achieving all those goals that we created with the community. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much for everyone who spent the time with us, whether you started during our Zoning 101 or joined in at the start of 7 p.m. We're going to transition now into Q&A. So the way that Q&A is going to work is that we've been getting Q&A through the Q&A feature. And also, we're going to take raised hands. So we're going to switch back and forth between written questions and live questions. There is a lot of folks online tonight, so we do ask if you can keep your questions up to 3 minutes so that we have time to get to everyone and everyone has a chance to ask a question or leave a comment. So to start, we're going to start with a couple of written questions. Luce, if the screen can get taken down and we can start the Q&A. Great. Thank you very much. So just to start, how many people live, work, and go to school in the targeted area?
Hi, yeah, so I can take this question. So we're focusing on Jamaica as a whole. And from the 2020 census, we saw that there's over 200,000 residents that currently live in Jamaica. And so the number for people who work and go to school in Jamaica would probably add a little bit more than that. But yeah, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, who is conducting the survey for the commute from one end of Jamaica to Wall Street using the bus and train? So a lot of that data ends up coming from the MTA, from DOT, the Department of Transportation. We had received that data working with them, but we can try to get more information on how they actually conducted that survey. But we currently don't have that information.
Specifically, talking about the data point that was shared in the presentation, that is from the American Community Survey. That was from 2018 to 2022.
Thank you, Lisa. Next, I'm going to transition into some of our raised hands. So first, if Blossom Ferguson can get promoted.
My question to you is, you said that we won't know until July 11th if all this proposal goes into effect. Am I correct in assuming that, or?
Yeah, so what July 11th is called a scoping meeting. So I think maybe to answer your question more directly, this is still an ongoing process. This process is going to probably last until sometime next year. So there's still kind of quite a bit of time before that it gets to that point.
Oh, okay. That was one of my questions. And the next one is that these buildings that you are proposing in the different areas, are the residents, these investors that are coming in to put these buildings, are they, when you say affordable houses, how would that be for someone in a low income bracket?
That's a really great question. So we actually have our colleagues from HPD on the call as well. Annabelle, can I ask you to talk a little bit about the MIH affordability program?
Sure. So The MIH program is written into zoning, and there are requirements. If you're not familiar, there are various options for those requirements, and they have to do with the percentage of how many units would be affordable, as well as what level of affordability there would be. And when an area is mapped with MIH, as I believe proposed, once if a developer comes in to build a building of a certain size, I believe it's over 10 units, they will have to provide the percentage of units at affordable levels per the MIH requirements. And those are to be permanently affordable units.
Okay, fine. Thank you. And these units that in one of the presentation, they spoke about whether it was condos or co-op. Where do you plan to have the condos? Is that already established or still in the work?
So the thing about residential zoning, or some of the zoning that we're proposing, it allows for like a range of different housing types. So condos and co-ops are something that can be created here. And so, it's something that we've heard a lot of seniors ask for, that, they want to be able to still have property in this neighborhood, even if it's not a single family home. So that the opportunity is there for condos and co-ops.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for your questions. So next, if we can promote Lisa Edwards, please. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clear.
Hi. So I was at the earlier webinar, and I'm a long-term resident of Jamaica, Queens. I'm a legal services attorney, and I'm also part of a group called J-Care, Jamaica Community Against the Rezoning Expansion. It's a group of over 170 multiracial, multilingual, and multi-generational longtime residents fighting gentrification and displacement. We believe this process is undemocratic and that DCP and Councilmember Williams, they don't really want community feedback, as is illustrated by this town hall. And from what I understand, the future town halls coming up, which is not a town hall at all, has not been properly publicized. I have made my own neighbors aware by flyering my building, and it does not allow for community members to hear each other's voices and discuss. We hear that infrastructure, including the sewage system, might not even be adequate for this plan. And yet DCP and Councilmember Williams have not shared with the community what the plan is in regards to the infrastructure costs. We demand a real town hall that allows for community discussion, including a hybrid option, so that people can participate in person or remotely. We see nothing to protect the existing residents of Jamaica, low-income tenants, homeowners facing foreclosure, small businesses whose rents are rising. Proposal is new affordable housing at over $2,500. What about our needs for better roads, parking, green spaces, schools, services? If DCP and CM Williams won't protect Jamaica residents, we will.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you also for joining us for the Zoning 101. Really appreciate that you were there and throughout this night. I know it's been a long night. We really appreciate that you've been able to get the word out to your neighbors. I think, part of this neighborhood plan is just thinking about kind of like the civic engagement in this neighborhood. We know so many people are so civically engaged and have been making sure that they know about these upcoming meetings, these upcoming changes and everything that's happening in this neighborhood. Um, I think, to your point about wanting to have more opportunities to have these conversations, we do want to make sure that these opportunities are happening. We have been having all in-person meetings since last year. Although I do hear you that we need to find better ways to make sure this information is getting out there. Happy to have a discussion with you afterwards to see if there are better ways that we can get this information out there. I would love to learn from you on that.
Yes, we would love to meet with everyone from a grassroots perspective. J-Care basically is something I fell upon. I would not have known about any of this without running into someone on the street. I know nothing about it until a month ago. So whatever 23 meetings happened, it didn't hit my community. And I'm a block away from Jamaica and it's affecting me.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And we'll make sure to reach out to you to schedule some time to talk. Thank you for joining us. Next, I want to promote Abu, who's next in line. Abu, you should be able to unmute and ask your question.
All right, cool. So I have three quick questions. One is for a lot of the zonings, they mentioned there's no parking requirements for a residential building. Is that true? Is that correct, what I was reading on the slides?
Yes, for some of the zoning districts we're proposing, especially around like Jamaica Center, there are no parking requirements, but that also means that developers can create parking if they want to. It's just that we're not requiring it. So what ends up happening is that a lot of developers still end up requiring still end up building some type of parking because they know that this neighborhood is more reliant on their cars. So even though we're not requiring it, it's not that we're like not making it an option.
Okay, so just remove the constraint for that for developers. Is that my understanding? Okay. You mentioned the hypotheticals that, the current zoning as it is. So like, this is a broader question. Like, the zoning allows for larger buildings, commercial or residential, yet is not being utilized. So why are we changing something that's not currently being utilized to begin with? So that's the broader question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, we took a very, very long approach of analyzing the zoning today. We've heard so many different like concerns and issues around the neighborhood and thinking about like, well, is there anything from our zoning that's prohibiting some of these things from happening? And at looking at some of our districts, we were seeing that like, oh, we think that this district it really isn't actually helping Jamaica Center be like this commercial shopping destination that it's always historically been. So we really took kind of this fresh look with fresh eyes because the last time we've done this process was back in 2007. And now we just have like a number of new tools that we didn't have back in 2007. One of the biggest ones is MIH, which is an affordable housing tool that only recently came out, which was something that we didn't have in 2007. So it's, one way for us to kind of take a fresh look at some of the work that we've done and acknowledge that like now that we have new tools, it opens up so many new possibilities.
So I just want to clarify just on the focus, right? Is the affordable housing component change? Is that the biggest change? Like, I would assume for no for like commercial development, like it would be, speaking with developers of like what is needed to build the Jamaica for them not to build those high residences. So is it primarily the novelty, as I say, the Jamaica plan is the affordable housing requirement in the ordinance in those areas? Is that, or is that too broad of a, generalization that I'm making?
I mean, I think on its highest level, this really is a housing and jobs plan. So I think if you're thinking about it in that way, then yes, that is correct.
All right, regarding the housing component, so I live near Merrick Boulevard and Jamaica Avenue, and I yesterday I just biked around Merrick Boulevard, and oh my God, it's not accessible to sidewalks at all. The businesses are like car repair and this sort of thing, covering completely the sidewalks. So uh, are these zoning reinforced or anything? Like this is not accessible. This is a highly residential space. There's a lot of movement going on, and people cannot. It's not accessible to anyone with even just walking. So like you cannot even assess it by walking. So you have to go through the streets to go through it. So how can you imagine? Like yeah. So like this is not currently yeah. So if it's not currently being enforced, then how can we imagine by allowing all this amount of development to occur? How are you going to force it?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I want to highlight about a neighborhood plan is that we're not just only focused about zoning changes. We are talking and focusing on like capital investments and programs and policies and services that like all, help support an entire neighborhood. Because again, zoning can't solve all these problems. There has to be kind of like a more comprehensive approach. So we are working with a number of city agencies. That's why we're going to continue engaging the community. Abu, I think you would be really great at one of like our conversations around transportation. So I hope that when we send out these emails, you definitely join kind of one of our conversations because we really need that perspective that you're just describing right now. So all that to say is that we're still working to think through kind of like what changes need to happen in order to like help support the neighborhood plan. And the last thing I'll say is that the environmental review process is studying some of these things that you described. So that's also like a very long analysis that's going to start taking place. Like I mentioned, this is the start of the environmental review process. So we'll learn more kind of how these zoning changes are going to impact a neighborhood.
One last question, and this is really important. So, like, is there any way for citizens to report these things and like gather these? Because like it seems like it's very common. I've been to a couple of community meetings. I hear this commonly of access to the sidewalks and that sort of thing. And can it be recorded, measured, and where we should not be discussing this randomly in some sort of meeting. Uh it should be reported. So is there any way of recording or is yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a number of different ways. I think you'll commonly hear the city say, report it to 311, but I think I want to also offer a couple of other options. So the council members' teams are on this call also. Amir had put into the chat his direct email. Please always feel free to reach out to the council members team. They can work with you also to think through and discuss some of these issues and try to find solutions. You also are a part of a community board, being a member of this community. So please also reach out to your community board. There are different ways to civically stay kind of involved in your neighborhood. So just wanted to offer two other ways aside from 311.
Thank you very much. I don't want to take too much of your time.
I appreciate it. And thank you for all your questions. And also thank you for joining us during the Zoning 101. Thank you. Next, we'll go to Esther, and then we'll switch back to written Q&A for a little bit.
Thank you. I wanted to emphasize what ways are we guaranteeing affordable housing as I watched the process of the downtown development happen with the Barclays, where apartments were going for like 6,700, which aren't affordable for not only city workers or civil service workers in those spaces. I have been at the in person, so thank you for those things. But as we're starting to see the developments around Queens, where even just housing, purchasing housing, I have a lot of retiree family members. And when they were trying to get the current development downtown in Jamaica, they were talking about 3,500 for studios, which if you have Social Security and those type of things, it's a very fixed income. and that's not even affordable for them to be able to do. I just don't want to see what happened downtown Brooklyn happen. And in addition, with these development, are there contract procurements, requirements to make sure that MWBEs are part of the percentage of these build outs in these forecasted contracts? And opportunity for art and green spaces to happen in those areas.
Thank you, Esther. I'm gonna, I think, work my way backwards, but just talking about kind of arts and culture. One of the things about the zoning districts that we're thinking about and proposing is that they allow for many, many opportunities for what's called community facility uses. Because that's an available option that any kind of like building could mix into their within the building, it's essentially covers a lot of arts and culture. So essentially, I think the sum of what I'm saying is that like throughout Jamaica, many arts and cultures can take advantage of that opportunity to be able to kind of grow within the neighborhood because there's going to be plenty of community facility spaces within that area. That's number one. To your other question about just your concern about what happened in Brooklyn and hoping that the same kind of story doesn't evolve here in Jamaica. I think, something that I had mentioned in my previous answer to Abu was just that, previously we didn't have some of the tools that we have today. So MIH, which is that mandatory inclusionary housing tool that we've just finished talking about, that is a tool that we now have access to. So for example, today, there is an affordable housing tool in Jamaica, but it's called voluntary inclusionary housing. So as the name implies, and like you have just experienced, it doesn't require developers to create affordable housing. It's only a voluntary program. So if they want to, they can, and if they don't want to, they don't have to, which is why we really want to ensure that MIH is a tool that's here in Jamaica, which essentially mandates them to create a portion of affordable housing. So that portion of affordable housing within every single development in Jamaica, so that, like you mentioned, it's not just a building full of 4,000 plus units, 4,000 plus studios. It's actual, like, a range of incomes that could be right next to really great access to transportation and things like that. And just to answer your last question on an MWEVs, Annabelle, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how that works within, especially I know working together with HPD, which is very different than working with developers who they themselves have their own kind of workings on that. But I'm not sure if you have anything you can add about how HPD works with that.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Were you asking me, Jasmine?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Can you just repeat the question?
Of course. I think Esther had asked the question more generally, if developers would need to work with MWEBs as they're doing this new development happening. I know just generally for developers, I think that's a completely different process, but I'm just wondering, maybe just to ask it, if HPD has any requirements to work with MWEBs when
Yes.
HPD is the developer.
Yes, that's correct. So if there are, particularly if it's an HPD owned site, and we do a request for proposals, we do have specific requirements that I believe I'm actually not sure on the percentage. I can get back to you, but there is a minimum requirement for MWBE partnerships in the development team.
Thank you for the answer. I just want to emphasize on, and thank you for all your responses about the development of just doing studios in one bedrooms, because as I saw that development happen in downtown Brooklyn, it pushed away families. Queens is known for family areas. And if I don't see enough equitable 2 or 3, then it's not really meant for our community, which means that there's less housing. And we already had 330,000 families already leave New York and an additional 80,000. because the realization is that everyone can't buy property. There's been an influx of property being buy to build out two-family homes for rentals. So I would just really push for the council member to really pay attention to how many units are being made for studios, one bedrooms, two bedrooms, and three bedrooms, as we have a housing crisis and we have a lot of asylum people already who have the families. If we're just doing one bedrooms, that's not really adequate for families or studios as well.
Thank you, Esther. We appreciate the comment, and I think that that's really important for us to continue to hear those kinds of comments. And I'm glad that the council members team is here as well to hear that.
Yeah, thank you, Esther. I also want to highlight that I think there's a lot of interest in the affordable housing programs that zoning can provide. Next week, we do have the zoning deep dives, which is on June 20th. We'll focus just on housing and what the housing programs like MIH through zoning can provide. So looking forward to seeing people there and learn more about it.
And thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, I will switch to a couple of written questions and then we'll come back to raised hands. So next, just another MIH question. So when you speak of mandatory inclusion requirements, are those rents permanent? And if so, who's going to make sure that apartment owners keep those requirements? So Annabelle, you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but the rents are going to be permanently affordable. So that means that throughout the entire building's lifetime, that unit has to stay affordable, which is very different from kind of other affordability programs that either existed or used to exist. You know, there were some programs that the unit would only stay affordable after a certain period of time, and then it could revert back to market rate. This program, very different. It's going to stay throughout the entire building's lifetime. When it comes to kind of, I guess, enforcement in the sense of who's going to keep the owners to make sure that they keep those requirements. Annabelle, do you have more information on how, I'm not sure if owners need to kind of have this kind of reporting back to either HBD or DOB?
I can get back to you on how it is tracked. I do believe it is tracked because it is part of when developers build affordable housing, they have to have a what's called a regulatory agreement. And so it details the ways in which you know, the units are affordable and ensures the affordability for the life of the project. And so I think we consider, you know, to an extent, these units to be a bit more rent stabilized, I would say, than as Jasmine was saying, with more voluntary programs or situations.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. So next question, when will these changes be implemented? Can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? And so we, after tonight's town hall, we'll make sure to send out a copy of this presentation that we just finished going through that has the zoning changes that we're thinking about. We'll also send out a copy of the zoning 101 in case if you were part of that pre-show after tonight's meeting. We'll make sure to also send around the recording in case you want to re-listen to the conversation tonight. Elisa, do you want to take on when these changes are going to be implemented?
Sorry, changes for the zoning proposals?
Yeah, I think they're just asking kind of like when is it looking to actually happen?
Yeah, I think earlier on the presentation, Siobhan had mentioned that we will reconvene again next year for the ULURP process, the Uniform Land Use Review process, and that's when the official public review process for any type of zoning changes starts. And that's going to happen next year. So between now and the rest of this year, we'll be doing a lot more community engagement, hearing from you guys. And the scoping meeting is also a great space for people to get their comments, provide their recommendations on what should be analyzed in the environmental review process that will look at how these proposed zoning changes will affect the neighborhood. So there's still a lot of opportunity for people to be involved in this process. And again, these zoning changes won't happen, and we're still in the midpoint way, and we're still doing a lot of public review.
Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for describing kind of like this timeline on like a high level. We did have some questions just asking about timeline, so appreciate you answering them. So next, looking at when will the environmental study part start? So the environmental study is actually starting now. So this marks kind of the start of this process for environmental review. Like we mentioned throughout the presentation, we are working on different tracks. So the environmental review is one of the tracks that are getting started. So the scoping meeting will make sure to kind of collect all these comments of the things that the community wants to further study. And then afterwards, for probably like the next 6 or 8 months, a team will be working on studying all those impacts. Okay, so we're going to move back to some of the raised hand questions, and then we'll come back to live written questions. So next, if you can promote William Scarborough, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, thanks, Jasmine. Uh, First, a brief comment and then a couple of questions. I've been involved in the process for quite some time, and I think the goals that have been outlined, a lot of them are laudable. But I know you said zoning can only create opportunities. I think at some point there needs to be some more discussion about how the other goals are going to be achieved. For example, achieving equitable health and safety outcomes, how specifically those things are going to be addressed. Preserving the cultural history and diversity and so on. I think that there needs to be more attention to exactly how those things will be proactively addressed. The questions that I have, and one of them has been raised a couple of times, has to do with the issue of affordability and how that's going to play out for the residents that are here. Do you guys have any other tools other than the mandatory inclusionary housing to generate affordability? I mean, because if you have 20 to 30% MIH, that still leaves 70 to 80% that's not included. And the housing that is being built around, particularly in downtown Jamaica, seems to be largely luxury. And as somebody mentioned, studios, one family, and so on. And, I don't think we want to end up with a situation where you have maybe 20 to 30% affordable, and then the rest is luxury housing, because that defeats the purpose of what's being done. So my question is, are there any other tools outside of the mandatory inclusionary housing that can promote affordability in the housing stock that's not included in that? My second question, and you guys didn't touch on the industrial yet, but I'm really concerned about the two zones that you did not discuss. The zone along Liberty Avenue between Merrick Boulevard and 180th Street. I don't understand why that is being considered for upzoning from M1 to M2 when that is right across the street from residents who have already been receiving really serious impacts about the businesses that are there. And then the zone along Dunkirk Street, which is again right across the street from houses, is being zoned from M1 to M3, which is, it allows for the most invasive types of power plants, businesses, et cetera. I don't understand the rationale for those things, and maybe that can be explained or revisited. And my last point is, I think if you guys are doing a virtual scoping, that it shouldn't be at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. If you want to get input from people who are not available at that time. So those are my concerns.
Thank you very much. And also thank you for just always being so involved in our meetings. And I just want to like give you a shout out because you've really been involved in this process.
Thank you.
So I think just kind of starting with some of your first comments, 100% agree with you. I know we emphasize and talk a lot about kind of the non-zoning strategies that need to happen in order to help support a lot of our goals. That's what we're going to be spending the summer doing together. So again, we'll make sure to share all this information out, but we really want to spend this summer, this fall, talking about those non-zoning related strategies because those are equally as important in order to, help achieve a lot of the goals that we set out through this neighborhood plan. So we do want to make sure that that's being emphasized. I think there's so many important things that so many people have raised that we want to make sure that that's getting addressed through the neighborhood plan. So more to come on that, but thank you for raising it and also wanting to make sure that that's a big part of this plan. I think to your other questions, going back to affordability, you had asked about what our affordable housing tools are. MIH really is our main affordable housing tool right now. We previously had, again, a tool called voluntary inclusionary housing. But again, that was an old program from like the 1980s. It only was an optional program. So again, if you didn't want to, you didn't have to, which again is unfortunate. But now we have a new tool, which is MIH. I think, one of the things that we are exploring, and these are again like different options, and we'll figure this out throughout this process, is that HPD is able to create kind of like all affordable housing. This does depend a lot on kind of like what public land is in the neighborhood. So we are taking a look at kind of like all those range of options to see where we can build more like 100% affordable housing. And so we are trying to look at like different ways, again, like not zoning related, other ways to be able to have this affordable housing across Jamaica. I think like Council Member Williams' team mentioned, and Amir, you can talk a little bit more about this, that, some of the corridors do have a lot of faith-based organizations along there. And again, Amir, I'll tap you in for kind of talking through a little bit about that and how that affects affordable housing.
Absolutely. One of the priorities the council member outlined is making sure our local faith-based institutions have the ability to provide a solution to the affordable housing crisis. If you guys drive down Guy Brewer, if you drive down Merrick, you'll notice that Allen AME, Calvary Baptist Church, Morning Star Baptist Church, St. Albans Congregational are major tenants on those corridors. And we want to make sure that the property that they own can be a part of the solution to the housing crisis. I've spoken to several of the pastors already, and they've expressed interest in using this new opportunity to help solve the housing crisis. And we trust our faith institutions to lead the conversation in the most proactive way possible. So when we think of those corridors, we think of it as owned by the community that can be developed for the community. So I just want to flag that for everyone as they look at the map, that those corridors in particular are a unique opportunity for us.
Thank you, Amir. And then also, William, just to get to your last point on industrial areas, Elisa, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so the industrial areas that we're proposing on the eastern side, those are new types of zoning districts that came through the economic opportunity. So they're going to be a little different from what we've seen historically. And we want to emphasize that we do have a zoning deep dive for the for the industrial areas, specifically where we'll just be talking about those areas. And that will be on June 27th. So we look forward to seeing you there and learning more about that. And we can talk through and you can ask more questions about what we're planning for those areas. So thank you for your question.
Also, I apologize. I'm just smiling because we got some warning lights from the building that we work in. So in case if you saw the flashing, also I apologize. I hope that didn't affect anyone's health, but our building just flashed some lights to just tell us that they were going to get turned off, but our lights are staying on. So I apologize for that. Thank you so much, William, though. We hope to see you in our industrial deep dive. And also, like I told you last time, and what I will also tell everyone, I hope that you continue to participate in that scoping meeting. We really want to hear these specific comments at the scoping meeting. If the concern is that there's industrial right next to like single family homes, please raise that in the scoping meeting. Please add that to the comments. William, I know you had mentioned the concern about this being at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. We'll talk more about that internally just to see what we can do so that, again, like everyone can stay involved in that scoping meeting. Thank you.
Also want to highlight that after scoping, we do expect take in written comments, and those written comments are taken in 10 days after the scoping meeting. So if you're not available during that scoping date, your comments are still going to be taken in and taken into consideration, and we are required to respond to these comments. So just highlighting that again.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay. So next, can we promote Yvonne Reddick? Yvonne, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. So I was given a link. So my name is Jacqueline Tomlin, and I live in the community, and I live in the downtown Jamaica area, and at this time the area is extremely overcrowded. The council woman does not come to the area to even survey it. I represent the tenants in Alvista Towers, and we are struggling with sanitation coming to our neighborhoods to clean it. We also have an influx of folks because of the amount of shelters that have been put inside of the community. We have one pharmacy, which is Walgreens. That Walgreens is bursting by the seams. They don't have enough staff to take on the amount of people within the community because they're dealing with the folks on my end by Alvista, and then the other neighborhood by the courts. We have no supermarkets. The supermarkets that we do have are not up to code. They sell rotten food. The bus stop can barely hold the amount of people that it takes to get on that bus. You all are talking about developing more. No one is even taking care of what's there. We are currently in mediation because the businesses do not like us there as tenants. We have roadblocks, cement blocks all throughout the streets because no one wants to allow the residents to park in the community. Our community leaders do not provide us any support with that. We are being bullied in that area. So for you all to dump more people in the area, it's overwhelming. We are begging for a stop sign on our corner because there has been more people have moved in, and it's becoming more crowded. We can't get a stop sign. So how are you all planning on bringing more people into the area when we don't have proper sanitation? We don't have proper signage. We don't have any infrastructure for any more people. Can we at least get a supermarket?
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I actually want to thank you too because Amir had invited me to your tenants meeting. I think it was a few weeks back or maybe a month ago now. So you know you did share kind of a lot of these exactly what you're sharing now. It's something that we've been thinking a lot about, kind of like that relationship between what it's like being a residential district right next to these manufacturing areas. So one of the things that we're thinking about is just that exact question. That area in itself, we do know that this is an existing issue, exactly what you just described as being a resident who lives in that area. which is why we want to make sure that it's a better kind of balance between the both, that like, we do want to acknowledge that those places provide jobs. They provide jobs for people, but also like exactly like you mentioned, there needs to be a better balance between not having cinder blocks on your sidewalks, like you all kind of shared pictures with us all. So we do want to kind of, and again, like, our agency is really tasked with thinking about the next 15 years, but also know that you're living with this now. One of the things that about that area that we're thinking through is just like, how do we create that opportunity for what you just described? How do we create the opportunity for more supermarkets or markets to sell like fresh and healthier foods? That's something that we've been hearing so much about. How do we create the condition for like a better like streetscape? So like you just mentioned, like, there's kind of like an area that feels like people actually live here and not just kind of like it transitioning from still like a manufacturing area. So we are working with different agencies, again, like to think about like how do we create that opportunity for everything you just described. But again, fully acknowledging that you're experiencing this today and now. And I think, that's very frustrating that I'm sure that a lot of these things are still happening and ongoing. I think in general, would love to come back to your tenants meeting so we can like learn more and talk more about kind of some of the things that you've all been experiencing, because a lot of it is really helping us shape kind of what we're thinking about for that area. Thank you. Can we promote Shireen Morgan next? And Shireen, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So I am in the meeting, I'm listening, and I want to thank you guys for giving us all the information that you have shared. I am representing Soundchat Radio, which is a Caribbean media house in the area. I'm also representing the Merchant Association of Rosedale, Laurelton, and Springfield Gardens. I'm the new chairperson, and we are very much concerned about a number of things. Overall, I don't have all the information about the overall plan, but I would definitely love to get whatever information you guys have on the actual impact on small businesses in our area, because obviously that is going to affect their representation. We're concerned about any kind of resources. I want to go back to something that one of the previous person talked about, in terms of our ability to be able to benefit from contracts or, anything of that sort. So I'm very much interested in getting whatever material that is already available on that. And I shared my email, so I don't know if you guys could send that, because we're about to relaunch Marls on August 17th. And these are the things, that we definitely want to have at our fingertip. We want to be able to speak with our members to inform them as to what are these plans, because it will directly affect their businesses. I had a question about the affordable housing. Basically, I don't know if I missed it, but do you already have a specific percentage of the total that will be earmarked in the proposal for affordable housing? Like for instance, I heard somebody mention 20 or 30. I don't know if there was a specific amount. And then the last thing I want to put out there under the umbrella of Soundchat Radio, I've said this before in a previous face-to-face at your college, is that our platform is available, and we'd love to have some of the discussion on air, because we have thousands and thousands of persons who are listening to us. And I can literally carve out a time, maybe on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, or bi-monthly basis, I should say, where you guys actually can share with, I want to say, mainly the Caribbean, which is a lot of South Jamaica, and a lot of Black Americans who do listen to us, and maybe answer some questions or just share some of these insights, since um, it is already seen that a lot of people don't get this information. I get the emails from Natasha, and I have other stakeholders in my various network who will share this information with me. But I think the regular grassroots person on the road doesn't even know that these conversations are being had. So we'd like to, step in to be a part of that tool, if you want to say that, or platform, so that you can share some of this info.
Sure, and that's incredible. Thank you so much for that offer. And we will make sure to reach out to you and take you up on that offer because, again, like any and always for us to get this information out there, our biggest concern and our biggest goal is to get this information out there in as many ways as possible. So, being able to share this information with your listeners and also, again, with the small businesses that you just mentioned, we are more than happy to come out and make sure that we're regularly sharing that information.
Thank you. I really look forward to hearing from you guys. And yes, so I'll just wait to see if you can address what is the percentage in terms of the affordable housing? Yes.
So the percentage that you had heard about, 20 to 30%, that percentage was related to that program that we keep talking about, which is called mandatory inclusionary housing. So what that percentage means is that whenever, if this tool is able to come through Jamaica through through this proposal, whenever a developer wants to build something new or kind of expand their building, they have to provide 20 to 30% of the units as permanently income restricted housing. So that's where that 20 to 30% comes from.
Okay. And I did have one other thing in terms of, I believe I heard that there is actually no mandate being placed on parking. So for somebody who lives in Queens and do business, and you know, I I transport myself via a vehicle, it is very difficult for me to support the businesses, for instance, on Jamaica Avenue, because yes, there are some parking, but sometimes the parking is so far from where you're going, you're in a hurry, whatever. I just feel that it's like you're adding, fuel to fire when you add a whole lot more units and there is no mandate where parking is concerned. I feel that a lot of Queens residents have their own cars. So even if they downscale, they might still want to keep their car. I feel like this is a way to force people to take public transportation who might not want to take public transportation. Is there a reason why at least not even a percentage is being mandated to supply some sort of garage parking or something where, for these new buildings?
Yeah, I mean, this is really helpful. And I think like in general, when we kind of have more of a conversation about how we spread this information far and wide, I also really want to talk to you about kind of what you just mentioned of just the work that you do with businesses and also being a business owner yourself. I think your perspective is so important. So we really want to learn more about exactly what you just mentioned. How are you using transportation around Jamaica? Like how is your drive and what does your commute look like? So again, we're in the middle of this process. I would love to learn more from you and all the business owners that you work with. I think in general right now, like the zoning that we're looking at, even though it doesn't, like, thinking about the areas, especially around Jamaica Center, like that area right by Jamaica's Avenue and Parsons Boulevard, like that area around there, even though parking isn't being required, developers tend to still provide parking because they know that this area of Southeast Queens, they know that people still drive into these neighborhoods. So, that's still parking will always still be an option. It's just we just won't be requiring it through that district specifically.
So is that a definite decision that has been reached? There is no compromise in the future, etc. Because I mean, if we're really honest, if somebody is not, if they're not mandated to do this, they're looking to maximize their potential. As a business person, we all know that. Therefore, it's not in their interest to take up space to build parking space. They'd rather put units there. So to me, I think the only way, if we're looking out for the residents and looking out for the good of the community as a whole, there should be a mandate where that is concerned. So does that mean that we've passed the point of um revisiting that option, that as an option? Or,
So yeah,
mhm,
we're
we
still in
passed
the
that
middle of this
point.
process.
Okay,
We're
okay.
still in the middle of a process. So none of this is like approved. None of this is, kind of like past that mandate that you think. This is
Okay.
still a process. Kind of when we get to that point is sometime next year. That is still getting worked out, like when sometime next year is, because again, we want to make sure that we're engaging with as many people as possible. So definitely want to continue that conversation with you.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Thank you for all your questions, and also thank you so much for offering some radio space. Okay. We're gonna take a couple of written questions now. I know it is very close to 9 p.m. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. We'll make sure again to send out this recording and all this information at the end after this town meeting. So just because we've gotten a few questions on this, just overall, what timeline are we looking at? Elisa, do you want to take on just describing our timeline?
Yeah, again, so we're going to have a scoping meeting to discuss the draft scope of work, and that would kickstart the environmental review process. That's going to be July 11th. Leading up to that, we're going to have the series of zoning deep dives, which I mentioned recently. Once that's all said and done, we're going to go back and go back to the community, hear more about what you guys want to see in this plan and proposal. Next year is when we'll be starting the uniform land use review process, which kickstarts public review. After that, it'll go through community board review, Queensborough president review, and then it'll go to city planning commission review, and then it'll go to city council review. So that whole process takes about 7 months, and we're looking to see that starts next year. So we're still in sort of the midpoint phase right now, and we hope to continue to engage with the community throughout this time.
Thank you, Lisa. So I know we're exactly at 9. Again, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and I know it's late at night. Thank you everyone so much for attending our town hall. I just want to emphasize this isn't the last moment that you can ask questions and just be involved in this process. We've gotten a number of questions through the Q&A, and also I know some people were patiently waiting with their hands raised. Please feel free to reach out to us at jamaicaplan@planning.nyc.gov. I think we have a number of different ways for you all to connect with us. If you feel more comfortable connecting with the council member, they can also connect you with us. Reach out to our through our website at jamaicaplan.nyc. And we also hope that you all join our zoning deep dives. Again, we have 3 of them. They're upcoming, and I'm sure that we will be sharing out more information on just all the events that we'll be doing in the upcoming summertime. So the last thing, just again, want to highlight that we are not proposing any changes to any of the 1 or 2 family district homes. We've heard from so many people that like these areas are these areas for a reason. Many people chose to live in these neighborhoods. We are not proposing any changes there. Our zoning changes are really focused in on Jamaica Center, which is this, commercial center. It's a shopping destination that historically has always been a shopping and commercial destination. So that is where our focus is on. It's focused on kind of these corridor areas like Hillside Avenue, Sefton Boulevard, Merrick Boulevard, and Guyar, and it's focused on these industrial zones along Liberty Avenue. So again, I want to thank everyone so much for attending tonight. We really appreciate you all just being such civically active in this neighborhood. So thank you again. We wish you all a wonderful night. Be safe, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thank you.